Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Hello, good afternoon everybody. So we are going to begin the session about women pioneers and social compromise. Mujeres pioneras y con un compromiso social. Tenemos la suerte de contar con los 4 ponentes de forma presencial. We got the 4 speakers here with us, and we can ask later some things we would like to ask for. And we are going to begin with Alberto de Leiva-Hidalgo from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. So Alberto, if you want to be the first one.
Ah, es esto lo que buscaba. Sí, estaba aquí. Sí. Okay. Well, the discovery in 1642 of the main pancreatic duct by Johann Georg Wiesson in Padua, original copper plate, which is exhibited in the Palazzo de Bo, University of Padua. No, there is one. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, this one. Was decisive after more than 200 years for the subsequent work of Claude Bernard describing the exocrine function of the pancreas, a classical document that included multiple experiments on pancreatectomized dogs. The doctoral thesis of Paul Langerhans in 1869, dedicated to his mentor Rudolf Virchow at Berlin Pathological Institute, investigating the histology of human pancreas, demonstrated the existence of polyhedral cells with clear cytoplasm grouped in small masses, which, in contrast to the acinar cells, did not show any transition to the ductal epithelium. Langerhans made it clear that he ignored the function of these cells. Lydia Maria Adams Dewitt was born in Flint, Michigan. After the marriage of 18, she worked at 8 as a teacher with her husband, Alton Dewitt, also a teacher for 9 years in various public schools. The mother of 2 children, she entered the University of Michigan in 1895 for a combined MD and BS program, completing it at the age of 40, at which point she broke off her marriage. Her small nail-sized medical graduation cap of 1898 includes the only one available Dewitt's photograph depicted here enlarged on the left side of the image. In 1902, Dewitt joined the Department of Medicine and Pathology, University of Michigan, headed by Professor George Dock, serving as an instructor in histology. In 1902, was admitted to the Association of Medical Anatomists, essentially an all-boys club from its formation in 1886. The hand-colored lithograph depicts an aerial view of the University of Michigan campus in 1907. The right side of the image shows the first medical school building, which opened in Michigan in 1850, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The University of Michigan faculty organization remained exclusively male. From 1889, both the senior and junior faculty research clubs were focused on promoting and fostering scholarly research among its members. No women were on its rules until 1955. In 1902, Lydia and 2 other female researchers were excluded from both faculty research clubs. Dewitt responded a month later with the creation of the University of Michigan Women's Research club to promote and assist women researchers. She served as the first president for several years. In the following years, Dewitt became interested in experimental studies related to the anatomical and microscopic analysis of the endocrine and exocrine pancreas and the pathophysiology of diabetes. Her master work was published in this 46-page manuscript of the Journal of Experimental Medicine in 1906. Dewitt conducted morphological and histological studies of the pancreatic gland and various animal species, including humans. These images show from left to right selected examples of islet of Langerhans of guinea pig, rabbit, and rat. The great majority of cells are polyhedral with a homogeneous protoplasm staining with eosin. The amount of connective tissue is much less than that of the surrounding acini. In general, the islet of Langerhans depict very similar structure in all species of vertebrate investigated. This other slide depicts two islets from a 4-year-old child pancreas on the left and two islets from a human adult pancreas for comparison on the right. In the child's pancreas, there is very little or not connective tissue within the islands, and the cells are somewhat smaller. In the adult, there is more connective tissue, which divides the islet into smaller compartments containing the cells. The increase of connective tissue with age is indicative of the gradual development of sclerosis of the gland. This other image shows the dissection of a cat's pancreas, clearly revealing the ductal system in its relation to the venous system. Dewitt performed experiments ligating the pancreatic ducts in order to show the anatomical and physiological effects of the acinar tissue and on pancreatic islet. The animals survive after the operation from 18 hours to 197 days. The pancreas was removed immediately after the death of the animals and small samples taken for microscopic analysis. The atrophy of the glandular parenchyma was clearly evident. On the contrary, the areas of Langerhans remain normal. The urine was examined during weeks after the operation and again just before death. Sugar was never detected. The rest of the gland was extracted either with glycerin or with water. Dewitt investigated the physiological digestive function. Starch digestion was tested with iodine and Felin's solution. Fibrin digestion was determined by the Burette test, and fat digestion was indicated by emulsification. Dewitt observed that the diminution or even absence of digestive action were proportionate to the degree of atrophy of the glandular tissue. She also investigated the glycolytic power of the pancreatic extract using the Cohnheim's method. This table shows that in cases of extreme acinar atrophy without digestive action, very slight change was observed, if any, in the glycolytic power of the pancreatic extract. These results speak in favor that the islands of Langerhans manufacture a substance, an active principle responsible of the glycolytic action. Pioneer contributions of Lydia Dewitt to the pathophysiology of diabetes between 1904 and 1906 included all of the following: histological structure of the islet of Langerhans is similar in different vertebrate species investigated. These structures persisted in the atrophied pancreas as a result of section, obstruction, or ligation of the ductal system. Animals subjected to the process of pancreatic degeneration with hypertrophy, atrophy of acinar tissue did not present glycosuria in any case. The islets of Langerhans release a secretion into the bloodstream without a digestive function. The secretion of the islet exerts a potent glycolytic function in the presence of muscle tissue, suggesting its role as an active principle in carbohydrate metabolism. Lydia Maria Adams Dewitt made and tested in vitro pancreatic extracts from duct-ligated atrophic pancreas 15 years before Frederick Banting and Charles Best. Neither of the published histories of the University of Michigan Medical School and none of the biographies of the leadership during her time in Ann Arbor even mentioned Lydia Dewitt. Scientific activities of Dewitt had never been acknowledged on the contributions of pathologists to the discovery of insulin, with the single exception of a brief mention by James Wright Jr. in a paper published in 2020. In recent years, both social historians and women's history specialists have made many contributions to the history of women in science. The book, Ladies in the Laboratories, American and British Women in Science, 1800 to 1900, written by the Scottish scientist Mary Rose Stuart Crees, is a survey of women whose personal journal publications are listed in the Royal Society Catalogue of Scientific Papers. The name of Lydia Dewitt appears now as one of the 6 most relevant women medical science of the century. She published a total of at least 45 main papers. And these are selected references of this paper, and thanks for your attention.
Muchas gracias, profesor. Adelante, venga, puede venir, que vamos a seguir. Thank you very much, professor. So, the next one speaker is Letizia Capriotti from the Università Campus Bio-Medico di Roma in Italy.
Oh. Why doesn't it show? Okay, can you see it? Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Letizia, and today I will talk to you about Anna Kuliscioff in honor of the centenary of her death. She was one of the first female physicians in Italy, the so-called doctor of the poor, a revolutionary and the co-founder of the Italian Socialist Party, and as far as I'm concerned, inspiration. But what I want to highlight with my presentation, what I think makes her story extraordinary, is coherence. Our harmony between conviction, intellect, and above all action. Her medical work was political, and her politics were always tied to her medical ethic. And that's the red thread needed to follow her story. So let's get started. Anna Kuliscioff, born Anya Rosenstein, was born in Crimea to a wealthy Jewish merchant family in 9 January 1857. And her privileged upbringing enabled her to divide her early years between her early philosophy and engineering studying at Zurich Polytechnic, and an active involvement in the political and intellectual movements that were rapidly spreading across Russia at this time. Those early years were too rich to well unfold today, but they constituted more than a prelude for the future. They shaped their understanding of medicine, politics, and duty, making her life an inseparable union of thought and service. For example, during this period, she observed the ideas of Peter Lavrov, whose populism emphasized the concept of social solidarity and the moral duty of the educated ones to work for the people's welfare. And she was also profoundly influenced by the anarchist Mikhail Bakunin, to the point she followed his circle across Switzerland, even joining one of his internationalist associations, seeing him as a kind of political father figure. And one less documented but crucial experience dates back to this period. After returning to Russia, her activism obviously led to her first political arrest warrant in 1973, and not her last. Escaping as exile, she changed her surname from Rosenstein to Kuliscioff, and she worked as a nurse in a poor rural communities, caring for peasants in extreme condition. That experience represented the final practical expression of her ideals, and last but not least, her growing desire to eventually become a doctor in the future. Their shift for anarchism to socialism was crucial. In July 1877, she met Andrea Costa, first anarchist, then socialist, and future co-founder of the Italian Socialist Party. And they share a political conscience, a relationship that lasted until 1881, and of course, arrests. They took part first at the Social Worker Congress in Lyon in February 1878, getting exile from France early after. And in September, they participating at the 14th anniversary of the International, where they both got arrested on charges of subversive activity and suspected conspiracy against state security. Anna spent 13 difficult months of detention of the Santa Veridiana prison in Florence. The process was significantly slowed by the status of Anna herself, both an exile and an immigrant activist. And during her imprisonment, she contracted tuberculosis, which would affect her health until the rest of her life. Difficult 13 months, but not static. Despite their adversities, they were months of intense moral reflection and political analysis, forging the unity between her medical vocation and her socialist faith. She kept in contact with Costa and their political entourage in a rich exchange of letters, and the idea of which kind of doctor she aspired to be crystallized and flourished, while keeping a distinctive sharpness in trial. And funny curiosity, her trials were public. And it happened one day that a writer, Carlo Collodi, was present at one of them. And her memory never left his mind, and he later immortalized her fierceness and compassion into the figure of the Blue Fairy in Pinocchio, his most famous book. Once left the Santa Veridiana prison, Anna's path through medical school was no less than fight. She studied in Bern and then in Naples, while pursuing advanced laboratory work for her thesis project in Pavia with the Nobel Prize Camillo Golgi at the General Pathology Institute, and completed her obstetric and gynecology residency in Turin. Her dissertation on the material histology of puerperal fever aligned with the microbiological revolution of Pasteur and Koch. Through meticulous experiments on uterine secretion, praised by Golgi himself, she identified bacteria involved in postpartum infections, examining their organism present in postpartum lochia, and testing their pathogenicity and pathogenic threshold in animal models. Two things matter here. First, she demonstrating that she has made the scientific method her own. And second, her scientific choices were not, of course, ornamental. Puerperal fever was a principal killer of working-class women, two of the categories she cared for the most, and the center of her future medical career. In fact, when Anna eventually arrived in Milan in 1897, she started serving in the free ambulatory clinic linked to reformers like Alessandrina Ravizza. Her patients were often the so-called sartine, seamstresses working up to 20 hours in peak seasons in airless room for miserable wages. She even visited herself her patient at their own homes in the poor areas of Milan. The nickname the people gave her, La Dottora dei Poveri, the doctor of the poor, come not only from waived fees, but from a method of care we would call today social medicine. The journalist Mario Borsa wrote of her visits they were something more than a medical call. She treated diseases, yes, but also loneliness, anger, and fear. She listened, she counseled, and she organized, of course. Three traits defined Anna Kuliscioff medical practice in Milan. First, scientific precision. She never abandoned the discipline she had learned in the laboratory. Her respect for evidence, her meticulous observation, her insistence on hygiene, and antisepsis. And second, what we call nowadays social medicine. Anna saw that illness does not arise in isolation. It grows out of living conditions. Each medical case was also a social diagnosis, of course. And third, dignity as a treatment. She understood that compassion itself is therapeutic. The way she spoke to her patients and the time she gave them were part of the cure. And at the same time, she carried on her operation on the political side too. In 1890 she delivered The Monopoly of Man, Il monopolio dell'uomo, at the Circolo Filologico Milanese. A thorough audit of institution, wages, education, professional barriers, maintains women's subordination. In the same decade, working with Filippo Turati, with whom she built a lifelong and heartfelt companionship, as the rich epistolary shows, she helped build the Lega Socialista Milanese and the culture engine Critica Sociale. In 1912 she founded La Difesa delle Lavoratrici, a newspaper by and for working women, and the culmination of on the legislative front was the Carcano Law of 1902 on the protection of women and children labor. And as we approach the end, I can't help but highlight again what made her story so compelling, even after a century. Her coherence, of course, as I said before, and the ideal of caring for the other, not only out of compassion, but as a brave political statement. And as all of us know, a story is never only a story. We still debate pay gaps, what does feminism mean for all of us, the care burden, workplace safety, and the meaning of social medicine. And I'd like to think about her legacy not only as a monument, but as a method. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Letizia. Great, thank you. Muchas gracias. A continuación va a presentar su estudio Sara Ferreiro, de la Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Next speaker, Sara Ferreiro from the Complutense University of Madrid.
Thank you. Buenas tardes, buonasera, good evening. Vamos a esperar a que se carga solo, ¿no? Vale, genial. Muy bien. Bueno, pues este es el tema que voy a tratar, ¿no? Discursos médicos sobre el cuerpo de la mujer, cuando la diferencia se traduce en desigualdad. Y bueno, que sepáis que esta cuestión de la diferencia y la desigualdad, digamos que a lo largo de la historia, ¿no? La desigualdad de las mujeres lo han garantizado diferentes poderes, ¿no? Pues principalmente en la antigüedad la mitología, la religión, ¿no? La mitología y la religión. Pero en el siglo XIX, en los albores, ¿no? De eso que llamamos la Ilustración, cuando se da la secularización, también se da la secularización de esto de esa justificación de la desigualdad de las mujeres, ¿no? Y pasa de un ámbito religioso a un ámbito todo científico y predominantemente médico y predominantemente neurológico, ¿no? Incluso. Entonces, vamos a ver ese tránsito, ¿no? a la legitimación médica de la desigualdad de las mujeres, ¿no? Ese discurso médico que construyó la desigualdad de las mujeres y espero que os parezca interesante a través de varios autores, ¿no? que ahondaron, o sea, neurólogos, ¿no? Entre otros, y otros médicos, ¿no? Que desarrollaron esta cuestión, ¿no? De una justificación pseudo-racional, ¿no? De la desigualdad de las mujeres, y luego vamos a ver también la respuesta de las propias mujeres, que en estos siglos también se da un pasar de objeto de la ciencia, ¿no? O sea, objeto de estudio, a sujeto de la ciencia, ¿no? Y con ello también la capacidad de réplica, ¿no? De réplica ante este tipo de discursos, ¿no? Vale. Vale, ahora. Vale, una introducción, ¿no? Os decía, claro, el problema no son las diferencias, porque diferencias hay múltiples, ¿no? Fisiológicas, anatómicas, podemos ver muchísimas diferencias entre los seres humanos, evidentemente, ¿no? El problema es cuando una diferencia o un tipo de diferencia se traduce en desigualdad. Pues no es lo mismo la identidad que la igualdad, ¿no? Podemos tener derechos iguales, ¿no? Y ser claramente diferentes en algunos aspectos, ¿no? Este es el problema, que algunas diferencias se han traducido en desigualdad, ¿no? A lo largo de la historia. Pues eso, diferencias biológicas, ¿no? Se han convertido en jerarquías sociales. No necesariamente hay que hacer ese tránsito, pero se ha hecho, ¿no? A lo largo de la historia. Os decía, bueno, tradicionalmente, pues en realidad ha sido la mitología, ¿no?, la que ha hecho este tipo de puesto de relieve, ¿no?, el tema de la diferencia, esa jerarquización a partir de la diferencia, ¿no? La diferencia puede ser en el mismo nivel o puede ser jerarquizada, que es cuando aparece la desigualdad, ¿no? En la tradición, pues podemos pensar en la mitología grecorromana, ¿no?, y en la tradición judeocristiana. Pensamos, las mujeres son los orígenes de todos los males, ¿no? La primera mujer, Pandora, abre la caja de Pandora y incluso la enfermedad aparece en el mundo, ¿no? Después está, por ejemplo, Eva, ¿no? Eva, el pecado original, o sea, podéis imaginaros, ¿no? Las mujeres como fuente de todo lo malo que existe en este mundo, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, en fin, es una obviedad, ¿no?, que la mitología. Y hablando de mitología, por cierto, no sé si conocéis los que estáis aquí, estos dos símbolos que se utilizan, ¿no?, para varón y hembra. ¿De qué vienen, no? También se utilizan para representar a planetas, ¿no? Planetas, no sé si sabéis, ¿no? Es la simbología que corresponde a Venus y a Marte, ¿no? Dos dioses romanos, ¿no? Venus, que sería la diosa de la belleza, ¿no?, de la reproducción, ¿no?, de la vida. Y después estaría, pues, Marte, ¿no?, el dios de la guerra. O sea, ahí hay como una diferenciación, ¿no?, de actividades, parece, entre los géneros, ¿no? Y me parece siempre muy curioso que el feminismo haya escogido esa representación de Venus para como su simbología, ¿no? A mí me gusta mucho más Atenea, ¿no? Es como igual de sabiduría, ¿no?, que Zeus en el panteón griego, es mucho más interesante, ¿no? Y también, bueno, pues no la excluye de la violencia, no es una diosa de la guerra también. Atenea es una diosa muy interesante, pero curiosamente se ha elegido esta simbología, ¿no? Bueno, pero estamos aquí en un congreso de medicina, entonces voy a pasar, ¿no?, este proceso de la secularización. Me voy a centrar en el siglo XIX, ¿vale? Porque quizá es en el momento del auge de la Ilustración, en ese proceso, ¿no?, de dejar atrás sí, secularización sería un buen término, ¿no?, para reducirlo. Cuando se produce, ¿no?, ese momento de apropiación por parte de la ciencia médica de la responsabilidad de justificar la diferencia entre hombres y mujeres, ¿no?, más bien la desigualdad, ¿no?, la desigualdad social. Y de alguna manera también naturalizó, ¿no?, la subordinación femenina, ¿no? Vale. Bueno, tenemos aquí un ejemplo, ¿no?, un ejemplo célebre. Paul Mobius, ¿no?, que es muy conocido por el síndrome de Mobius, que es una parálisis, bueno, los conocéis más, ¿no?, una parálisis facial por una afección, una enfermedad extraña, ¿no?, por una afección en los nervios. Pues este señor, ¿no?, escribió un libro que se llama La deficiencia mental fisiológica de la mujer, donde aunaba de que había, pues, los cráneos de las mujeres parecían ser más pequeños, ¿no?, y contener también unos cerebros más pequeños, ¿no? Y esto justificaba de alguna manera, pues, la desigualdad, ¿no?, que vivenciábamos en el día a día entre hombres y mujeres, ¿no? Se da, por tanto, ¿no?, en este siglo XVIII y XIX, con este tipo de discursos, ¿no?, un discurso médico que ahonda en esta cuestión de la diferencia sexual que legitima una desigualdad social, ¿no?, una desigualdad social. De un dato anatómico, ¿no?, pues por ejemplo esta cuestión del cráneo, ¿no?, tan famosa en esa época, tan dada a estudio de cráneos como la frenología, ¿no? Pues bueno, en fin, se da ese tipo de datos anatómicos que se transforman en una teoría moral del carácter, ¿no? Pues las mujeres pues tienen unos rasgos anatómicos que, bueno, que las dificulta, pues, las tareas intelectuales, pero les faculta para otras tareas muy elevadas también, o bueno, o eso se dice, ¿no?, en el discurso, que son las tareas reproductivas, ¿no?, las tareas reproductivas. O sea, siempre, o sea, parece curioso, ¿no? El útero no solo es un órgano reproductivo para las mujeres, sino que es un órgano productivo, porque produce completamente la idea de la mujer, ¿no? La produce en el sentido de que parece que está condicionada enteramente por esta cuestión de tener un útero, ¿no? Bueno, y se da una paradoja, ¿no?, en este momento de la Ilustración, ¿no?, que se supone que la Ilustración es ese saber que habla de lo universal y, sin embargo, tiene una visión bastante androcéntrica, ¿no? Androcéntrica. Lo masculino representa una singularidad y, sin embargo, se hace pasar por lo universal, ¿no? Lo particular se hace pasar por lo universal en este momento, ¿no? Vale. Bueno, claro, os decía antes, el útero como destino, ¿no? Como el útero que es un órgano reproductivo, se convierte, ¿no?, en ese órgano que produce a la mujer completamente, ¿no?, en el sentido de que es el destino es la procreación, ¿no? Antes habla un ponente, ¿no?, sobre el tema de la píldora anticonceptiva. Claro, es terrible porque la mujer, si no se reproduce, decía en aquella época, la mujer es su destino, ¿no?, la reproducción. De ahí textos tan terribles como el Yerma, ¿no?, de Lorca, ¿no?, en el que una mujer no puede reproducirse, no puede cumplir su destino, ¿no?, y la fatalidad de todo eso, ¿no?, la fatalidad de todo eso. Bueno, pues el útero en este momento se convierte en el principio explicativo total del ser femenino. Que de hecho, por cierto, que antes hablaba también de la intersexualidad y del hermafroditismo. Claro, el problema del hermafroditismo y la intersexualidad durante toda su historia, ¿no?, desde los orígenes, siempre han existido personas hermafroditas, antes se llamaban, ¿no? Por eso mezcla entre Hermes y Afrodita, que da lugar al hermafroditismo, ¿no? Hasta la nomenclatura actual de la intersexualidad, siempre el problema era determinar es hombre o es mujer para luego saber si, por ejemplo, tiene unos derechos u otros. O sea, esa persona puede votar, esa persona... O sea, quiere decir que la obsesión por el sexo muchas veces tenía que ver con esto, ¿no? De vamos a darle derechos a este ser o no, ¿no? Este ser o no. En fin... Y claro, eso que antes sobre todo trataba la religión, también que sepáis que se ha ido secularizando, ¿no? Y hoy en realidad la cuestión de los intersexuales, ¿no?, sobre todo se trata en la ciencia médica y, bueno, a veces de maneras terribles, ¿no? En España, en 2023, se prohibió por primera vez la cirugía en niños intersexuales, pero se hacían bebés, cirugías, ¿no?, a veces incluso en la década de los 50, ¿no?, cliterectomías, ¿no?, se eliminaba el clítoris de mujeres que nacían con el clítoris muy... Bueno, mujeres, personas intersexuales, ¿no?, que nacían con clítoris muy grande, se les retiraba, ¿no?, porque, en fin, había que encajar a ese ser en alguno de los dos cajones disponibles, que era hombre o mujer, ¿no? Hombre o mujer. Pues en John Hopkins University, ¿no?, en Estados Unidos, un teórico muy famoso, John Money, hizo todo este desarrollo, ¿no? Y bueno, en fin, si queréis luego en las preguntas hablamos de esto. Ahora me voy a centrar en las mujeres, digamos, XY, ¿no?, intersexuales, ¿no? Y bueno, en el siglo XIX hubo como este retorno a la histeria, ¿no? La histeria es muy antigua, histeria viene de hister, de útero en griego, ¿no? Y bueno, el concepto de histeria cobró como una significación importante. Tenemos ahí a autores como Thomas Laycock, ¿no?, que hablaba de un tratado sobre los nervios y las enfermedades de las mujeres, bueno, que hablaba sobre los desórdenes histéricos, ¿no?, y los vinculaba a las mujeres. Claro, si está vinculada al útero, ¿cómo no va a estar vinculada a las mujeres esta enfermedad, ¿no? La histeria, ¿no? La histeria. Y bueno, por supuesto, Charcot, ¿no? Charcot, neurólogo francés, ¿no?, en la Saint-Pétrière, que hacía todas estas performances tan curiosas, ¿no?, con mujeres histéricas, ¿no? En fin, fue como legitimando, ¿no?, esta cuestión de que las mujeres, por sus propios órganos reproductivos, tenían unas tendencias, ¿no? Y además decía Charcot, son tendentes a lo emocional las mujeres, ¿no? Naturalmente, ¿no? Naturalmente son tendentes a lo emocional y, por tanto, al desequilibrio, ¿no? También mental, ¿no? La patologización de las mujeres, ¿no?, en ese sentido. Vale. Bueno, anatomía y jerarquía, ¿no? Bueno, pues hubo una serie de ciencias, hablaba antes de la frenología, antropometría, anatomía comparada, ¿no?, que empezaron a hacer como experimentos curiosos sobre los cerebros, ¿no? Tipo, bueno, Paul Broca es de los más conocidos. ¿Cuánto pesa un cerebro, no? Los cerebros de las mujeres pesan más o pesan menos que lo de los hombres, ¿no? Para también justificar, ¿no?, si hay desigualdad social, tendrá que haber alguna razón fisiológica para ello, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, se decía, los cerebros de las mujeres son más pequeños y, por tanto, pues eso da cuenta de que son inferiores intelectualmente y por eso, bueno, se justifica también, ¿no?, pues el rol social que han adquirido uno y otro de los sexos. Bueno, yo pienso, ¿no?, si esto fuera así, ¿no?, los cachalotes que tienen 5 veces el tamaño, 6 veces el tamaño del cerebro de los hombres estarían ahora en la mayor jerarquía social, ¿no?, en la mayor jerarquía social y no nos dominan porque no quieren, ¿no? Porque no quieren, pero bueno, en fin. Sin bromas, ¿no? Volvamos al asunto. En este momento, pues se hacían del dato científico, ¿no? En la craneometría, en la medición del cráneo o también del peso del cerebro, ¿no? Del peso del cerebro y de las dimensiones del cerebro, pues de esos datos, ¿no? se hacía una tecnología ideológica, se justificaba una serie de cuestiones, ¿no? Pues se vinculaba normalmente, ¿no? A los hombres a la inteligencia y a las mujeres a las cuestiones reproductivas. Qué casualidad que coincidía con esas Venus, ¿no? Romana, la cuestión de la belleza, la reproducción, ¿no? Pues se vuelve a repetir aquí, ¿no? Lo que pasa que con otro discurso, esta vez médico, ¿no? Pero bueno, ya encontramos entonces resistencias, ¿no? Hay una autora que se llama Alice Lee que refuta la correlación entre cráneo e inteligencia, ¿no? Que haya algún tipo de correlación y hace estudios incluso, digamos que con una metodología mucho más científica que el de Paul Broca, ¿no? Demostrando que no existe una correlación entre el tamaño del cráneo y la inteligencia, ¿no? Bueno, además que sepáis que todos estos estudios no solo eran para explicar la jerarquía con las mujeres, también raciales, ¿no? Raciales. Se hizo muchísimos estudios. Anna Sterling lo estudia muy bien en cuerpos sexuados, ¿no? Cómo se midió el peso, ¿no? De los cerebros de personas racializadas y personas blancas, ¿no? Para demostrar también pues, su inferioridad, ¿no? en el campo de la medicina, ¿no? Y bueno, hay un libro célebre en todo este debate, ¿no? Con el tema de la menstruación, o sea, todo lo que tiene que ver con lo reproductivo de la mujer parece que es como la justificación, ¿no? Para su rol social. Y entonces, bueno, en todo esto la menstruación cobra un punto central, ¿no? Y hay un texto muy famoso, ¿no? Hay una serie muy famosa que se llama Sex Education, pero también un libro que se llama Sex in Education, ¿no? De Edward Clarke. Este hombre que no era una persona baladí, era un profesor médico de alto reconocimiento en la Universidad de Harvard, ¿no? Este médico que dio una charla en un club de mujeres, ¿no? Uno de los primeros clubes de mujeres estadounidenses, de Nueva Inglaterra se llamaba, ¿no? Y dio una charla que las dejó escandalizadas a todas las presentes diciendo, bueno, que las mujeres no podían estudiar como al mismo nivel que los hombres porque menstruaban y tenían que descansar cuando menstruaban, porque el desarrollo intelectual y el desarrollo, digamos, reproductivo chocaban, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, no se podía hacer las dos cosas a la vez y tenían que centrarse en lo más importante para ellas, que era el desarrollo pues, reproductivo, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, lo que se planteaba en este texto es que, bueno, las mujeres tenían que adaptar la educación. De hecho, se llama a fair chance for girls, ¿no? Como una oportunidad justa para las mujeres. Pues una educación adaptada a ellas, una educación que, por ejemplo, tenga en cuenta que no puede estudiar cuando están menstruando, etcétera, ¿no? Vale. Y bueno, y ya tuvo en su momento, ¿no? Por eso pongo ahí un versus, ¿no? Hay una autora muy famosa, Mary Patman, ¿no? Jacobi, una autora interesantísima, ya que hablamos de pioneras, ¿no? Ella fue la primera mujer en estudiar en la Universidad de París medicina. Y bueno, se opuso, ¿no? A esta teoría de que necesitábamos pausas, ¿no? Menstruales. Hizo un estudio, además, otra vez, mucho más científico que el que presentaba Clarke, ¿no? Que veía, ¿no? Que en realidad, estadísticamente, las mujeres podían hacer ejercicios de fuerza, de inteligencia, etcétera, mientras menstruaban al mismo nivel que antes de la menstruación, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, hizo una serie de estudios. Esta mujer que además, por cierto, tuvo un cáncer cerebral y hizo un artículo sobre su cáncer cerebral y el desarrollo. O sea, es una mujer muy interesante, ¿no? Vale. Y bueno, también, o sea, por incluir a más mujeres pioneras, ¿no? Estas dos mujeres que vemos aquí, Hollingworth y Moser, ¿no? Pues también se opusieron a esta cuestión de la necesidad de reposo. Y en el caso de Hollingworth, por ejemplo, que había estudiado sobre todo el tema de los superdotados, se opuso a una teoría muy popular en la época de que había más variantes entre los hombres que entre las mujeres. Esta idea, ¿no? de que los hombres pueden ser absolutamente estúpidos, ¿no? Pero al mismo tiempo la genialidad se da frecuentemente entre ellos, ¿no? Como que hay más variación entre los hombres. Sin embargo, a la mujer se le recluía la mediocridad, ¿no? Esto, por ejemplo, Dalton, ¿no? el famoso Dalton y Darwin, ¿no? Hablaban de que, pues eso, que la genialidad era propia de los hombres porque los extremos, ¿no? Se daban más en los hombres, las mujeres tendían más a la mediocridad, ¿no? Y bueno, ella demostró que no, porque de hecho ya está muy vinculada a los estudios de la superdotación, Hollingworth. Y Moser, en el caso de Moser, bueno, hizo estudios, porque en aquella época decían, las mujeres tienen problemas incluso respiratorios, no respiran igual, no pueden hacer ejercicio igual, etc. Pues ella dijo, o sea, correlacionó eso más con el uso de ciertas vestimentas, por ejemplo, los corsés, etc., ¿no?, que con algún tipo de fisionomía, ¿no?, que fuera deficitaria. Vale, para concluir y perdonar por el tiempo, el problema es cuando de una diferencia, ¿no?, de una diferencia se pasa, ¿no?, a esa desigualdad social. ¿Qué podemos hacer frente a esto? Hacer una reapropiación ilustrada, ¿no? La ilustración abogada por el universalismo. Es señalar, ¿no?, las incoherencias del propio discurso, ¿no? Es como usar la ilustración contra la propia ilustración, ¿no? Y decirle, bueno, pues vamos a buscar un discurso médico verdaderamente universal, ¿no? Verdaderamente universal, ¿no? Una ciencia inclusiva, ¿no?, donde se reconozca la diversidad sin jerarquizarla, ¿no? No se trata de negar la diversidad. Obviamente hay rasgos fisiológicos, anatómicos distintos, pero eso no significa que tenga que haber desigualdades sociales, ¿no?, derivadas de esas diferencias, ¿no? Y bueno, ya lo dejo aquí para concluir. Eso debemos de hacer desde la crítica feminista basada en la ciencia, ¿no?, una defensa de una ciencia más racional y más justa, ¿no? No es una defensa de una irracionalidad, sino de radicalizar la racionalidad, ¿no? Que precisamente ese tipo de pseudociencias como la ciencia del siglo XIX, ¿no?, de la frenología, etcétera, no tuvo en cuenta, ¿no? No tuvo en cuenta. Y bueno, lo dejo aquí y espero que luego haya algunas preguntas. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Sara. So, let's go on. Yesim Isil-Bulman, please, from Acidaben University School of Medicine from Turkey.
All right. My name is Yesim Isil-Bulman. I am from Acıbadem University School of Medicine, History of Medicine and Ethics Department. And I would like, Istanbul, Turkey. And I would like to thank you, first of all, International Society and the Nebria University and the Institute of Bioethics, History of Medicine Bioethics, and you, dear audience, for being with us at these late hours of afternoon in this beautiful city, Madrid, indeed. And then it's hard to, I see so many people are with us, and then I'm so impressed by the previous presenters, by the presentations of previous speakers. And I'm going to talk about the nursing and intercultural context in Turkey, especially in the modernization and secularization century, 19th century, that I mean. All right. I'll go this way. All right. What I'm going to mention mostly are nursing in pre-modern Ottoman era, shortly, role of modernization in health affairs, including impacting also influencing the nursing as a profession, emergence of nursing as a profession, beginning ages and then beginning years, and also the role of Florence Nightingale in this story, in this evolutionary process, foundation of the Red Crossing in connection with Red Cross, wars, Gallipoli, and modern times, let's say, in the early years of the modern Turkey. Well, what I would like to draw your attention is Roy Porter's beginning line. He says, first cry of pain on earth was a call for a healer at the same time. That shows it is as how old and how it's emergence of man on earth, human being on earth, is at the same time the emergence of healing profession. It's quite impressive, what I would like to say. This slide is for a short glance of the pre-modern period. Of course, in that period also care was given by women, and women were in this long chain of service of giving care in different parts of society, in the imperial palace, in the society, on the ground. For example, this is a birth scene from a miniature on the right-hand side, and we see some pages from a 15th, 16th century surgeon showing the obstetrical gynecological manipulations by women on women patients. And there were tabibes, tabib means female physician, and midwives and nurses playing their roles on healthcare. All right, I will jump to the, as I have said already, the modern and eras, which I mean with this 19th century, where the many reforms were at hand concerning Turkey. Modernization and reformation and westernization was adopted as a state policy, and then we see the annihilation of the Janissaries, old armed forces, one of which has become a very conservative power in the society, and then we see reforms not only at the military functions, but also in the civilian bureaucracy. That was a slow transition for secularization at the same time for Turkey. And then it has embodied with some reformation documents and bills such as Tanzimat and Islahat. Look at the years right in the beginning, in the middle of the 19th century. It was, we have gradually seen and witnessed a new administrative structure, new judiciary mechanism, and new education system. With education, I mean medical education, engineering, the sciences, all of them. It was not only a man's act, of course, it was you see the bureaucracy, it was a, let's say, group of people who put into effect of that policy as a state policy. All right, this picture shows the emperor, not emperor, it's Sultan leaving the school. That is the modern school that was renovated from an old palace school right in the center of Istanbul, or Constantinople, you can say at the same time. Well, the importance of this picture is we see the Sultan with the royal or imperial carriage, but in the behind him we see the chief physician and the professors, and in the back the students of medicine. What kind of school it was? It was again an exemplary picture, but very close to its original version. It was again an old palace, and it's called Imperial School of Medicine. And then it was, the nickname of the Sultan was the Adli. That means the just and equitable for all parts of society. It was taken the example of the Vienna School of Medicine at the time, in which, in many aspects, let's say, we see the parts of the School of Medicine, botanical garden, library, museums to teach basic sciences, of course, laboratories, collections, and library donated or taken, and quite a large sum of money was allocated for those schools, and students from all religious communities were enrolled in the school, not only the School of Medicine, but also engineering and others. And the section was practiced in the school, anatomy was trained, and the corpse were donated for anatomical experiments and also autopsies. All right. And when a foreign visitor came to that school, and then he was, while opening a door at his anatomy laboratory, he was amazed, he was stunned to see students of medicine practicing autopsy and dissection. And he was answered back by one of the students in French because the teaching language was French at the time. he said, Monsieur, ce n'est pas au Galatasaray qu'il faut venir chercher la religion. To Macfarlane, it was written in his book, and Galatasaray is the name of the building located. It still exists, by the way. All right, that was a hospital with impressive low mortality and licensed surgeons, and then a clinic at the same time. And then interns were trained hands-on experience, and there was no. Although there was a clinic, outpatient clinic and inpatient clinic, women were not accepted due to the conservative approach of the time in the wars, but we should see the end of the century in order to the opening of a obstetric ward in the School of Medicine. All right, medical staff was mixed from Austrian, they were hired, some professors were hired from Austria, as I said, Vienna School of Medicine, and some non-Muslim Ottoman citizens were practicing at school, as well as with the Muslim ones. All right, we see a school of pharmacology, and also the importance that for the emergence of women in the teaching practice. There was a school of midwifery for 2 years, and in those trainers were some of the trainers were from also Italy or France, for example. They were hired as well as some of the teachers, professors of medicine, and then they were. How did when the obstetrical patients were not accepted into school, how would they be taught the students of medicine when someone asked? House visits were paid to the houses, to the homes in the neighborhood in order to practice gynecology and obstetric, of course. Well, there were some innovations such as the practice of chloroform, almost 1 year after its practice, after its administration in obstetrics, in the delivery. And then the reforms kept going, and then the importance of that I am emphasizing the role of reforms that could help emergence of the women's in the healing practice, or let's say medical practice. Although female caregivers did not emerge out of nowhere in the 19th century, they were there in the teaching practice and in the medical practice, as I have said already. But they needed it. Schooling education was needed. All right, for example, some mission hospitals accepted the patients from all religious communities. We see the examples, but I would like to draw your attention to this one, as well as Fille de Charité, Sisters of Saint Vincent de Paul, etc., Schwestern, Sisters, Sirs. There was another mission called Kaiserswerther Diakony. This is the school where Florence Nightingale left United Kingdom for a while, and then visited that school to see the approach, the contemporary approach at the time. And then that was a quite important chain, buckle of chain, let's say. So patient care for the poor, needy and the poor, child care, orphan care, cared for the vulnerable people, went on, continued in the meantime. All right, this is a plaquette from the, again, San Benoit mission, telling that we give service without discrimination. Well, all right. I mentioned Florence Nightingale. It says emblematic, symbolic character, not only in the practice of nursing in Turkey, but also in the world. For example, Britain, France sided with the Ottomans during the Crimean War. My colleague mentioned Crimean War, Crimea, for example. So we can remember Crimea because of that war at the same time. You see the port of Istanbul here, we look at the port of Istanbul from a barrack called Scutari Barrack or Selimiye Barrack, where it is a place where turned into a military hospital. In this hospital, Florence Nightingale, a group of nurses, 38 nurses, gave service for the wounded soldiers. All right. Well, this is a view of the Selimiye Barrack, and this is a picture taken from Lady Alicia Blackwood's book, Scutari, the Bosphorus and the Crimea, published just after the war. End of the war. All right. Well, let's see more concretely how did it go? What are the details of practicing nursing at the time, or not only nursing but also medicine? Well, soldiers kept dying not only because of the wounds in the war, or they were dying at the same time amid horrifying sanitary conditions. It was 10 times more due to the diseases, contagious diseases they contracted at the time. And then the situation was quite dire at the beginning, and medicines essentials were in short supply, and the hygiene was quite not a good condition. And one of the first Nightingale's first purchase was of towels, for example, enormous supply of clean shirts, plenty of soaps, such necessities, and plates and knives. And also she was very attentive to about the sewers in order to leave them away and to improve ventilation, to restore a hygienic condition. All right, this table, this painting is at the National Portrait Museum, yes, in London, and the central figure among soldiers, patients, and patient relatives, even here, we see Florence Nightingale. She was not the only person, but the leader of a group of nurses. We can describe him as a pioneer of modern nursing, and he was mentioned in the documents and archives that Lady in the lamp in order to check control by wards into the wards continuously. All right, she was far ahead of her time in realizing the cleanliness, but look at the last sentence. She was also quite attentive. What Semmelweis has proven, although you remember the tragic life of Semmelweis. He was a chief of staff at the Austrian-Hungarian hospital, and then he noticed the clean hands, and he said, simply wash your hands before any medical manipulation. But the Florence Nightingale was the person who learned that lesson. Look at the year, a couple of decades, one decade later on. It was quite important. So these are some scenes from the hospital, from the military barrack. Nightingale's accomplishments during those disastrous years were largely the result of her concern with sanitation and its relation to mortality, as well as her ability to lead, to organize, and to get things done. All right, the literature tells that the importance of she and the team's practices infection control, patient assessment, therapeutic communication, care, public health advocacy, keeping statistics, paying peculiar attention to epidemiology, and environmental theory. That environment was a medical environment. So to create a total care environment, what she meant, to help patients restore health. And we can talk about the pledge from the ethical perspective. All right, that is what That's why we describe, we can tell that she was ahead of her time, indeed. She worked endlessly to care for the soldiers
2
themselves
minutes.
and making.
Yesim, please.
I'm about to finish. Yes. All right. Those lessons were taught by the generations to come after her. That's what I mean, not only in different parts of the world in Europe, but also in Turkey. And then you see the different parts of the things that she has done. And this is a faunus, for example, a kind of lantern, Ottoman lantern. It is from the museum in London, Florence Nightingale Museum. All right, now what we see is the foundation of Red Crescent just after the Crimean War. And then, because women was missing, not only civilian, but as well the lack of women care, female care, was understood during the war and conflict. And then we see at the same time the foundation of Red Cross. Look at the year, 1864, and 4 years afterwards, we see the Red Crescent. And also, I have to emphasize that in most of those occasions, or conflicting situations, they cooperated and they collaborated. And an example to this is Ottoman-Russian War, for example. And then, but it was not until the Balkan Wars, that is the beginning of the 20th century, that we cannot see the official emancipation of nursing as a profession. That is why I brought. Now, from now on, from those lessons, and nursing emerges an accepted profession for women during the Balkan Wars. And in the end of the 19th century, we see female nurses, midwives practicing inside the hospital for the female patients. All right, I am proceeding. These are the scenes. Nurses and doctors operating together. All right. I will. Also, Yesim, one of the doctors, chief physician of obstetrics and gynecologists, encouraged the emergence of women taking part in the healthcare forces. And then also we have the World War I. It also coincides with the rising status of nursing as a profession in parallel with the wars I would like to mention. And it also ignited the emergence of women in the society, even in civilian atmosphere, in the war, as a profession, nursing as a profession, and also emergence of women's role in the society on the ground. This is Sophia Elby is a symbol of that kind of groundbreaking achievement. That's what I have brought here. And she, as my colleague said, not only worked endlessly, like Florence Nightingale on the war and the civilian era, but also he was for the women's rights, the rights of women. He was also the advocate of women's rights in the society and in the official circles.
I'm so sorry, Yesim, but it's very interesting, but we must stop here, and we have no time for yes, I know, but right. I think we must stop here. I'm so sorry. Right. Okay? So, the conclusions of the professor. Thank you very much. Very interesting. We always have no time for everything. I'm so sorry. And very nice. I would like to say before the break time now, I am proud to be part of this 12th meeting. I would like to thank the organization of the meeting. I'm very proud, and I want to say that the high quality, I think you agree with me, it's a great quality of works, studies, presentations. I'm very proud to be here and learn a lot, and I can't talk anymore. Estoy muy contenta, estoy muy agradecida al Congreso y a la organización de haberme permitido estar aquí. Quiero realzar la gran calidad de todos los ponentes, de sus estudios y que ha sido una aventura estupenda. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much.